It's hard to believe, but some extreme leftist movements have embraced protests aligned with Hamas, a group openly calling for genocide. Bill Maher didn't hold back as he tore into Whoopi Goldberg, exposing the startling contradictions of woke culture in one of his most cutting critiques yet. Let's dive into this explosive confrontation. Bill Maher has made a career out of dissecting cultural trends with a sharp wit and an even sharper tongue. This time, Whoopi Goldberg became the latest recipient of his unrelenting critique. Maher didn't just disagree with Whoopi. He systematically dismantled her defense of woke culture, showing how the once noble ideals of social awareness have morphed into an unyielding dogma.
You've noticed what I've noticed. But I find that oftentimes when I'm watching the news, I'm only getting portions, because one of the things that happens, I was listening to you talk about the kids that had the Hamas flags.
The moment Whoopi brought up Antifa, it was clear she was trying to frame the discussion in a way that aligned with her usual woke rhetoric. She drew parallels between Antifa's actions and other bad players in society, claiming their presence was always exaggerated by the media to paint a certain narrative. But Bill Maher, ever the sharp realist, didn't let her argument go unchecked. He stepped in with that signature combination of logic and wit that cuts through noise like a laser. Maher didn't sugarcoat his response. He flatly called out how selective outrage in the media often excuses or downplays the actions of groups like Antifa while magnifying others. He pointed out that the same media outlets accusing one side of stoking violence conveniently ignore when their side.
It reminded me of when people were saying Antifa is there, and doing that. So bad players show up and make stuff happen, but do you find that the view that we're being shown seems to be meant to guide us into thinking about people one way, when in fact it may be a much bigger conversation?
Oh, of course. I mean, the media is always going to just chase what is interesting to watch.
Does the same. And in the case of Antifa, Maher's dismissal of Whoopi's justification was pointed and direct. Just because someone claims to fight for justice doesn't excuse the chaos and destruction they leave behind. He made it clear that selective morality has no place in an honest debate. When Whoopi tried to pivot, Maher hit her with an undeniable reality check about media manipulation. Are we really seeing the full truth, or just a version designed to fit a specific agenda?
I mean, I used to be able to watch the nightly news, for example. I can't do it. I mean, first of all, it should be called, here's some video we found that's fun to watch.
Yeah.
And it's narrative over truth.
Yes.
I mean, it's not like when I hear people talk on either side of it, I always think they're lying. They're just telling me half of it.
Yep. Yeah.
And I never trust them anywhere until I check out the other half.
Yeah.
And it's tedious.
Yeah.
I just want one place, and of course it's my book and my show, where you can get both.
He highlighted how stories like those involving Antifa are often used as tools to polarize, guiding viewers toward prepackaged conclusions rather than the full picture. Maher didn't just challenge Whoopi's point. He dismantled it, piece by piece. It was a classic Bill Maher move. Expose the double standards, show the cracks in the argument, and leave no room for rebuttal. Take the Hunter Biden scandal, for instance. Biden's pardon of his son was slammed by many as pure hypocrisy, but Whoopi didn't hesitate to jump to his defense. She claimed it was all about Biden's frustration with a flawed system.
Criticism is valid because, Democrats stand on this moral high ground all the time, and, they act so self-righteous. The reality is he didn't have to say anything in regards to, whether or not, his son wanted to be pardoned. He could have said, hey, man, I'm not focused on that right now.
But Maher wasn't having it. He ripped into the argument, pointing out the glaring inconsistency. How can wokeism preach accountability yet conveniently look the other way when it's one of their own? Let's be real. Maher's delivery wasn't just sharp, it was downright brutal.
I want to talk about Whoopi Goldberg because I got so many texts this week because she attacked me the week before.
Sure.
So everybody was like, oh, Bill, I get you're enjoying the karma. First of all, I'm going to talk about this at the end of my show next week, teaser. But there is no fucking thing as karma, okay? Get over that.
He broke it down with his usual no-nonsense style, showing how this kind of selective outrage completely undermines the principles woke culture claims to stand for. It was like he held up a mirror and forced everyone to take a good, hard look at the contradictions. By the end, Maher didn't just poke holes in Whoopi's argument, he left it completely unraveling.
But isn't it interesting that it's called, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's the view.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
But
there is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
What makes Maher's takedown so compelling is that he destroyed her with the big questions. He asked something that many viewers were likely thinking. If wokeism is about accountability, why do its proponents often ignore their own rules when it's convenient? This wasn't just about Whoopi, it was a full-blown takedown of a movement built on contradictions. Maher exposed how woke culture's selective outrage destroys its own credibility, dismantling its claims of justice while revealing its hypocrisy. It wasn't just a critique, it was annihilation.
To bury the Hunter Biden.
You're talking about the press doing that?
He's saying that's what they did, and that is what they did. They buried the Hunter Biden story before the election because they were like, we can't risk having the election thrown to Trump. We'll tell them after the election.
And we know for a fact that that's what they did?
Of course. You don't
but
follow
I mean,
this.
saying you know for a fact that that's what they did? I don't know what they did.
I know, because you only watch MSNBC.
No, that's not true.
The debate reached its peak when Bill Maher unleashed a blistering critique of woke culture's stranglehold on politics. Maher tore into the rigid and self-righteous ideology, labeling it political dynamite for the far right. Using Whoopi Goldberg's own defense of wokeism against her, Maher dismantled her claim that it's merely misunderstood. He exposed its extremes, protests supporting Hamas, and radical calls to tear down societal structures as proof that woke culture has spiraled out of control.
Well, I had a different question, but it struck me that in the first segment you used the term woke, and you said that woke is what was sort of ruining everything. And I know that you're
No, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump could get reelected.
Yeah.
So the term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. And so I was surprised to hear you use the term because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
and
migrate.
So why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Alert to injustice, who's not for that? But words do migrate. Now, I'll use any term you want.
Maher's points didn't just counter Whoopi's arguments, they annihilated them. He argued that this unchecked extremism is alienating moderates, turning wokeism into a divisive and self-defeating movement. By the end, Maher left no doubt that woke culture's moral authority is nothing more than a crumbling facade. Bill Maher has made it clear that the evolution or devolution of the term woke is one of the most glaring examples of how the left has lost its way. What was once a meaningful call for justice and awareness of systemic issues has been hijacked, weaponized, and transformed into a rigid ideology that alienates ordinary people. Maher doesn't mince words. This isn't progress, it's a political disaster waiting to happen. In fact, he argues that this very distortion of woke culture is fueling the resurgence of figures like Donald Trump. It's a movement that claims to fight for inclusivity but often shuts down any perspective that doesn't align with its own narrow, shifting standards. Maher also zeroes in on the hypocrisy within the left, pointing to their unsettling support for causes like Hamas, something he views as crossing an ethical line. This isn't the left he remembers, the one that championed free speech and reason. Instead, it has become a mob driven by outrage and mean girl politics, obsessed with tearing people down rather than building anything meaningful. Maher's critique is surgical, exposing not just the flaws in woke culture, but the broader moral failings of those who champion it. Maher didn't stop there. He dove deeper into the cultural dynamics that underpin wokeism, using Whoopi's past statements as a case study. Remember her defense of Michael Vick, the football player involved in a dog-fighting scandal? Whoopi argued that his actions reflected a cultural norm from his upbringing, rather than pure malice. Maher seized on this, not to vilify Whoopi but to show how cultural context can be both enlightening and dangerous. Maher exposed how such defenses could excuse harmful behavior, forcing Whoopi and everyone watching to confront uncomfortable truths about morality and accountability. This wasn't just a debate, it was a calculated, devastating rhetorical takedown.
Can we just understand that part of our sorry racial history in this country is that the point of view from a black person is often going to be very different and sometimes shocking to a white person. I pulled the quote from when Whoopi defended Michael Vick. Remember Michael Vick was the football player who was electrocuting dogs? And I'm a lifelong PETA board member. You know, okay. Also someone who believes the Nazis were very racist. Okay.
Oh, you.
But here's what she said about Michael Vick. He's from the South. This is part of his cultural upbringing. For a lot of people, dogs are sport. Instead of just saying he's a beast and he's a monster, this is a kid who comes from a culture where this is not questioned. Okay, You see the point here? Again, I don't agree with her on Michael Vick.
The conversation shifted gears when Maher brought up the evolution of terms like homeless becoming unhoused or people experiencing homelessness. He dismantled the progressive shift from solving homelessness to glorifying it as some misguided form of natural habitat. Living under a bridge isn't a lifestyle, it's suffering, and Maher called out the absurdity of treating it like an endangered species needing protection. He stood firm, reminding everyone that real compassion means getting people off the streets and into stability, not sugarcoating their circumstances with new terminology. Maher didn't just critique Whoopi. He challenged her to rise above the limitations of her arguments, and in doing so, he delivered one of the most pointed critiques of woke culture to date. Maher's takedown of Whoopi didn't just stop at ideology. It extended to policy. He didn't hold back as he tore into the left's approach to the issue.
We used to do, well, you did it. I was a guest on what was the homeless show? Comic Relief.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
You were, great show.
Yeah.
And homeless was a term that I thought we kind of came up with because people were calling them bums and vagrants and hobos.
Now that's
homeless.
hard.
Now,
It's
no.
It's unhoused.
Well, it's
now.
people
Unhoused.
experiencing
Now it's unhoused.
homelessness.
While Whoopi defended these policies as addressing systemic failures, Maher countered with a pragmatic view. He argued that true compassion lies in helping people off the streets, not romanticizing their suffering. For Maher, the progressive tendency to treat homelessness as an untouchable issue of identity rather than a solvable crisis was not just misguided, it was destructive, was leaving people to live their best life under a bridge. Really the definition of compassion, or just a cop-out disguised as empathy. He shredded the notion that this stance wasn't humane or effective. This wasn't just a clash of ideas. It was a battle over the soul of progressivism, and Maher made it clear that enabling dysfunction is no substitute for meaningful action. And once again, Maher's ability to ground his arguments in real-world implications gave him the upper hand, leaving woke ideals looking hollow and idealistic by comparison. As the debate reached its conclusion, Maher made sure to highlight the deeper consequences of their exchange. He argued that the growing chasm between moderates and extremists is ripping society apart, with woke culture acting as the catalyst for this division.
But they're experiencing it on the street.
Yeah.
Okay, the liberal view of that was for compassion's sake. We're the liberals, we're compassionate. Let's get these people off the street. That's not the view of the, whatever word we're going to come up with for this. Their view of the homeless is they're an endangered species that needs to be protected in their natural habitat. Living their best life under a bridge. You know, that to me is crazy. That's the kind of things, I haven't changed on that. I still think we should get these people off the street. That's the compassion sake. So I didn't change, they changed, and there's lots of examples of that.
By meticulously dismantling Whoopi's own words and defenses, Maher demonstrated that this isn't just an ideological issue, it's a deeply personal and cultural one. His critique wasn't just sharp, it was a compelling and devastating indictment of wokeism's broader impact. So what's the takeaway from this clash of titans? Maher's dismantling of Whoopi's defense of wokeism wasn't just about their personal differences, it was a reflection of the larger cultural battle that continues to shape public discourse. And in the end, it wasn't just Whoopi's arguments that were left in tatters, it was the very foundation of woke culture itself. If this fiery debate got you thinking, don't miss out. Hit like and smash that subscribe button and join the conversation in the comments. Share your take on this explosive showdown and let your voice be heard in the clash of ideas.